What's going on, guys? So today I have a parts review video for you, and this is something that I want to do more of in the future. And I will say this right up front, and I'll probably say it at the beginning of every single video. I am here to provide good, solid, dependable, reliable, trustworthy information, and I will never ever review a part that I have not used extensively. Now, the time of the install may vary for each part, but I don't really see myself doing a review on something that I've had installed for less than at least a year. There may be a couple exceptions, but I'll put it this way. One of my biggest pet peeves is people who install a part, they'll take their car around the block and then they'll write a review for it, or they'll do a video on it and talk about how great and how awesome it is. And that's fine for initial impressions, but how can you possibly accurately review a part if you haven't had it installed long enough for it to break or for any other problems to arise? So that's my spiel. I'll say it at the beginning of every video just in case somebody catches one particular video so that they know, because I think that's important. So this is the Mishimoto X-Line radiator. It is a 3-row radiator, meaning that it has increased cooling capacity. So it can hold more coolant, and because it holds more coolant, it has more thermal capacity, which means that your car can run harder and longer before it overheats. And to clarify, that does not mean that your car will run cooler. For your car to run cooler, you would have to use a different thermostat, which generally speaking, I do not recommend. But it can handle autocross, and it can handle maybe the heat of the South longer than an OEM size radiator. At least that's the principle behind it. So I installed this part myself back in 2011 when my car had about 90,000 miles on it. And it was uninstalled last October in 2018 by 6-star SPF. And at the time the car had probably about 160,000 miles or so, ballpark. And the reason it was uninstalled is because I had a new CoyoRad installed, because this radiator is leaking, and I will touch on that in more detail further in this video. As far as the difficulty, honestly, I would give this 3 stars out of 5 as far as difficulty, 5 stars being incredibly difficult. An OEM radiator is fairly easy to install, and I would give an OE radiator probably 2 stars. However, because this radiator is thicker, there are some fitment issues and hoses need to be trimmed, and if you don't trim them just right, then you could have them rubbing or kinking, and it's a pain in the butt. In fact, this radiator is something that I talked about in the 10 things I hate about my STI. It's really not that bad, but because it is thicker, it is more complicated than a standard radiator install. So the basic specs on this is that it is 28 inches across, 17 inches high, and the core, this part right here, is about 2.5 inches deep. And it's also an all aluminum construction. That differs from an OEM radiator because OEM is going to have plastic end tanks on the top and bottom, and it is also going to be thinner as far as the core goes. Most OE cores are about 1 inch to 1.5 inches, so that's where that extra cooling capacity comes from. The next thing on my list is price, and honestly, this is one of the more expensive radiator options on the market right now. It comes in at around $360, and if I remember correctly, that's about the same price that I paid for it back in 2011. So next I want to talk about the pros of this radiator. And the biggest pro to running a thicker radiator, at least in theory, is that it's thicker, therefore it has more cooling capacity, therefore your car should be able to cool better. And honestly, I have not seen that. This radiator does outperform my OEM radiator. However, my CoyoRad performs even better than this. And that is very disappointing, considering the price point of $360, and also considering that this is thicker and it has issues with the hose fitting and everything like that. So going through the hassle of getting your hoses to fit without rubbing or kinking and paying $360, I expect this to be the best radiator on the market, honestly. And for it to get outperformed by a $300 radiator, that's kind of disappointing. So I want to make sure that I touch on that, because that is the biggest thing that Mishimoto hammers with this radiator. Is it's thicker, it's racing radiator, it's going to do X, Y, and Z. And me personally, in my experience, in 6 years of having this, I have not seen that. Yes, it's better than OE. No, it's not better than some other cheaper options out there. So make sure you consider that if you're looking into this radiator. Now, since I mentioned the pros, it's only fair that I touch on some of the cons, which I have already mentioned some of them. But the biggest issue with this radiator is fitment. Now, I knew going into this that it was thicker, but it does have fitment issues, and I think even with a thicker radiator, it probably could have been designed a little bit better to minimize some of those issues. The biggest issue is that the overflow tank, which sits over here, tends to vibrate and rub against the timing belt cover, which isn't cool. And the hoses, the upper and lower hoses, have to be trimmed just right, otherwise they have issues. If they're too long, by even say a half of an inch, they will kink up. And if they are too short, then obviously they don't fit, or they will rub against the AC pulley, which sits right in here, and that's really not cool. I have had issues in the past with this radiator and hoses because they were not trimmed exactly right. And one instance was I had my car in the shop. This was not 6-star, but I had my car in the shop, and the top radiator hose, which makes an S shape, the shop had installed it backwards, which it's universal, right? It doesn't matter which way it goes. But because it was trimmed a certain way, when they put it backwards, it didn't quite fit, and over time it had rubbed against the AC pulley, and it got a hole in it. And there was a time when I was running this where I had to use zip ties to try and hold the hose away from the pulleys so that it wouldn't rub. If you cut them just right, yes, they fit, but in my opinion, that's a headache and a nightmare that you have to deal with. And when you're paying $360 for a radiator, I don't think you should have to deal with that. And most of these issues come from the fact that it is wider. And I understand that. I knew that going in. But in my opinion, the performance on this was mediocre. It was less than it was advertised to be. And, you know, when you go with a radiator like this, you're expecting top-of-the-line performance, top-of-the-line fitment, and all of that. And this radiator just did not do that. I don't mind dealing with the hoses and sacrificing some other things if I'm going to get the performance out of it. But honestly, in my opinion, I did not experience the great performance that this was expected to give. So if you're still watching this video at this point, I want to give you a huge personal thank you, because the longer you watch my videos, that really helps my channel grow. That helps YouTube's algorithm realize that my content is interesting. And if you feel so inclined, please give this video a like. We are in the home stretch. Next thing is tuning requirements. Obviously, this is a radiator, and it does not require a tune. However, I wanted to make sure I put that in my notes so that in the future, when I'm reviewing turbos and air oil separators and other things like that that may require a tune, I think it's important to let people know that it may or may not require a tune. This is a radiator, and it does not require a tune. All right, guys, final 2 points. Number 1 being value. And when it comes to value, honestly, I have to give it a low 2 out of 5. 5 being high value, 1 being low value. And for that, I am considering the cost of $360. I am considering the fitment with the hoses and all of that. And I'm also considering the mediocre performance. Yes, it performed better than my OEM radiator did as far as cooling goes. However, it does not outperform my CoyoRad, and more importantly, it developed a hole in it. And that is why I have a CoyoRad in my car right now. What's really sad is this only lasted about 6 years or so, which is the same or even a little bit shorter than my OEM radiator did with plastic end caps. And this is billed as being an all aluminum construction. It's going to be great. They have a lifetime warranty on it and XYZ. I'm not interested in the lifetime warranty on it. From my understanding, even if they would honor that, I would have to send this in and they would send me a new one, and I'm over this radiator. I kind of hate it at this point. I would not put another one in my car. I already have my CoyoRad. It cools much better, and I am happy with that. So that's something else to consider with the lifetime warranty on some parts. You really have to read their terms and conditions and see whether they'll honor it or not. And even if they do, sometimes you have to send in that part in the meantime. And with my car being a daily driver, I couldn't do that. If they would be so kind as to send me a new radiator and, you know, trust me to send in this old one, which I would do, I still don't want another Mishimoto radiator. I'm done with it, to be honest with you. I'm not happy with it. It did not meet my expectations, and it was nothing but a pain in my ass for 6 years. So my final point comes down to my recommendation. And do I recommend that you buy this part? Honestly, no, I don't. I can't. Not for the price, not for the performance, and as I mentioned, the fitment issues and the quality issues. So If you could find one for a steal, maybe you have a buddy of yours who's upgrading and he's getting rid of it dirt cheap, then hey, you can go for that. Just know that you're going to probably have fitment issues, you're probably going to have hose issues and whatnot, but you can do that. Other than that, I really would not recommend this. I would not recommend paying full price, and even for $300, I would not recommend going with this Mishimoto, at least the X line. I can't comment on any other Mishimoto rads, but the X line was nothing but 6 years of a pain in my ass. And like I said earlier, I don't even want to follow up with them on the lifetime warranty because I don't want this part. I am done with it. I've had it, you know? And so it is an okay part. As I said, I think it's overpriced and it underperforms. But with that being said, I hope this video helped you. And hopefully, if you're in the market for a radiator, this will help you buy. I don't care if you buy this radiator. I'm not telling you that you have to. I'm not telling you that you can't. All I'm doing is trying to put out some good information so that you guys can make a more informed decision when it comes to buying car parts. So with that being said, as always, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll catch you guys next time. Probably like 3 years ago on a... My Koyo Rad is not a 3-row It's not an intercooler, damn. This is a type of video that I want to do more of in the future.